And recording. Jai Shri Narayana.
Jai Shri Narayana.
Thank you, Iswajit, for this meeting. So we are going to discuss
Thank you for inviting me, Mataji.
Yeah, some interesting things that
Yes.
are happening at global level.
Yes. Well, and also, Mataji, I think what isn't where I feel perhaps we as Hindus sometimes don't do enough is we don't reconcile our we don't reconcile our beliefs with. There's not enough of there's not enough reconciliation of our beliefs with modern with the modern geopolitics, because that is something that affects all of us, whichever nation we might live in. And I think getting a dharmic perspective on current events, it's clear to everyone, Mataji, that we're living in tumultuous times, we're living in strange times, we're living in interesting times, whichever word you want to put it. And I think it'd be good to look at it through a dharmic lens. And I wondered whether we could perhaps focus on that today.
Oh, definitely. This is an excellent point. An excellent point. I believe that Hindus are a bit at a disadvantage here, but it's a disadvantage coming from a greater responsibility and a higher position. Because Hinduism, or maybe we can say Vedic knowledge, Vedic culture, is very deep and vast, and in a sense much more demanding than other ideologies. Not demanding in a coercion sense, in an artificial, oppressive, repressive sense, but it involves a much bigger responsibility. And it is obvious that not many human beings are ready for such an amount of responsibility. That is why it's more difficult for Hindus to be actually true to the real fundamentals, the real foundations of Hinduism or Vedic culture. Because in, let's say, the big comparison term, is the Abrahamic ideology, which I've been talking about for over 20 years now. Now, in 2004, I had this epiphany, this realization. I was talking with the then chief of the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, Sudarshanji. And, we're talking about what Hinduism actually is. He was commenting and saying that lots of people are taking Abrahamic religions and then pasting, the let's say Krishna's face on Jesus,
Yes.
and they get confused, because they think they know what they're talking about. And that was really a great realization for me. And at that point, I started to actually dig deeper, and I found that this is it. This is the key problem. It's a cultural superimposition that we are unable to recognize when we identify with a particular set of beliefs that has been imposed at global level as the ideal parameter for religion.
And that Mataji sets the rock, doesn't it, basically?
Yeah, that's the root of the problem. So my work for the last 22 years, basically, has been to go deeper into the study of Vedic culture, the Hindu Vedic culture itself, the real original thing, as distinct from any cultural superimposition that we can actually define as, for example, Lokika Shraddha, or superstition, or popular belief. And I think that this is the main problem. Because when we don't know what we are talking about, we don't know what the problem is, how can we apply any solution? So Hindus are confused in that sense, because they are actually, unfortunately, not very deep in the study of the original, the genuine Dharma and Vidya. They have been convinced that they have the authority of race, of the Hindu race. They have the DNA. So they believe that whatever they think, because they're Indian, whatever they think is the real thing. And nobody else has, the DNA, the physical ability to actually understand the Vedic culture.
Do you think that's changing? Do you think that's changing
Hopefully.
now a little bit? Do you think there's been any change there?
Hopefully. I think that, Ishvara's plan, Narayana's plan, Vishnu's plan has been, trying to, solve this problem.
But also, I think with the global culture of the internet now and social media, I think that a lot of Hindus are waking up to the fact that there are very, very lots of them, very sincere practitioners of Sanatana Dharma in other countries of the world. I think, to their credit, Bhaktivedanta, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada did some good work.
Oh, definitely.
In that area.
Definitely.
So,
unfortunately, we can say the heirs, have been messing up by applying cultural superimpositions to the original message. So they have, for example, portrayed Jesus and Mohammed as avatars of Vishnu, or Vaishnavas, or even avatars of Vishnu, which is, goes to show that they don't understand either Vishnu nor, Jesus or Mohammed. And definitely not Christianity or Islam or Abrahamic ideology. So we need to fix that. Actually, it didn't even start with Bhaktivedanta Swami. It started with Vivekananda. Vivekananda was actually the first to get this idea of going into the West. Before Vivekananda, I don't think any Hindu had gone to the West trying to talk about Hinduism.
Sure. And on that note, I mean, the average person now, is very aware that the world is in a state of flux. So, to start this discussion, some people might say that these tumultuous times have always been present. But other people say that this is a unique period in human history. But where do you stand on that, Pastor?
Okay. The Vedic approach is the idea, the vision of the cycles in time.
Yes.
In the Vedic approach, time is not linear. It looks like linear, but it's going in cycles. The cycles are not a closed circle, they're like a spiral, which is unlimited. But still, we go through, similar cycles and similar situations again and again, like the four yugas and the day of Brahma, the Manvantaras, they're all cycles. And inside the yugas also there are other cycles. This is shown, we can see it very practically in the movement of the stars and the planets. The stars and the planets keep moving in a circle, orbiting, and yet they're never exactly in the same place compared to the rest of the universe, the rest of the stars and the galaxies and everything. Because we are also traveling, around the galaxy. So the great contribution of the Vedic perspective is a much greater vision, a much deeper and wider vision of reality. So it's the times we are living in are special in the sense that we find ourselves at a particular position of the planets and the stars and the entire universe.
Do you think astrologically we're at an intersection?
Yeah, astrologically, astronomically, that's the same thing. In ancient times, astrology and astronomy, that they were one thing only.
But what is the specific intersection we find ourselves in that is unique in attitude at this moment, and how, in your view, how does that relate to what we're seeing around us geopolitically?
Okay, I would say in one word, internet.
Right.
In all the recorded history that we can know about, there has never been such an opening, such a ease of access, availability of knowledge. That's why we are at a very special time, moment in history. And according to the astronomical calculation, we are now at the end of a great year, which is 20, about, I think, 21,000, 26,000, I don't remember, years, Earth years. So it's a complete turn of the cycle. And this,
so it's the end of the cycle,
a big cycle. It's not the end of the Kali Yuga, but it's, yeah, because Kali Yuga is much longer than 26,000 years,
but it's the end of a specific cycle within the Kali Yuga.
Yeah. The precession of the equinoxes here. So we are coming back to what it's a big cycle. It's a big cycle. And from the astrological point of view, the influence point of view, it's the end of a karmic cycle. We have entered the famous age of Aquarius, which
we're moving now into the age of Aquarius.
Yeah, we have already moved into the age of Aquarius. Of course, it's a passage. It's not instant, but we can already see the signs. We can see how it works, and it's a very particular time when technology is meant to help us broaden our view, our perspective and horizon. We are ending, we already overcome, we have gone beyond the age of Pisces. So the characteristics of the age of Pisces are the organizations, the crowds, the masses,
Right.
people. Yeah, the fish are usually moving all together, especially the small ones. Yeah,
A shoal of fish, basically.
yeah. And sheep as well. They're like land fish, practically speaking. So we have the sign of the Pisces is very emotional, sentimental, emotional, and both in a positive and in a negative way. So you have fanaticism, you have blind following, blind faith, superstition, all this stuff. They're very characteristic of the Pisces sign. And
they wear their heart on the sleeve.
Yeah, well, yeah. More than wearing the heart on the sleeve, they are, what to say? They're, following the emotions. They're like we can say spontaneous, but not in a good way. Like in a blind way.
Yes.
Is
that linked to the group think and organization?
Yeah, exactly.
And all these sort of things.
Yeah, the herd mentality. And that doesn't mean actually wearing one's heart on one's sleeve, because sometimes, often people actually hide their actual feelings and they follow the crowd. They hide their feelings, they repress their own feelings because they have the need to follow the crowd for whatever reason, political, cultural, financial, social, whatever. So basically we are getting out of that. But we are still having problems with the ideologies that became so prominent in the age of Pisces, and specifically Christianity.
Right.
Because, maybe, not many people know that the early Christianity symbol was not the cross. It was a fish.
Reflecting the Piscean element.
Yeah, that is, interesting. And actually, it was a fish because the initial, the word, the Greek word for fish, was iktos. And iktos is the acronym for Jesus, blah blah blah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in the first meetings among Christians, they were drawing the fish to recognize each other, not the cross. The cross came much later. But in any case, the point is that this last, the age of Pisces came after the age of Aries, because it goes, backwards.
It was 21,000 years ago, though, at the age of
2,160 years ago.
2,160 years ago, not 21,000.
21,000 is a complete circle.
Right, yes.
The entire zodiac.
All right, that's the entire zodiac. We're talking subdivisions.
Yeah, we are talking about subdivisions. We have 12, which I think that 21,000, 2,000, 2,100, say something like that, into 12 is something like 26,000. Yeah.
Now I understand. So what you're saying, Mataji, is that just before Christianity appeared on the scene,
yeah,
we moved from the age of Aries to the age of Pisces.
Yeah.
it just so happens that Christians, in the early Christians, used that fish symbol. The Pisces was linked with organizations, herd mentality, and groupthink, and we're now
with mass
moving away
movements.
from that.
Mobs and crowds. Before
We're
that,
moving away to the age of Aquarius.
Exactly. The age of Aries was an imperialistic age, because Aries is, in astrology, is ruled by Ares, Mars, which is the ontological principle of war, the god of war, and the head of the ram was used to break down the doors of the cities. When you go and attack a city, they use this kind of symbol.
Yes, that's where
the battering ram comes, because it was a head of a ram.
Yeah, that's why we use the word battering ram.
Exactly. Yeah, there are still some, so many archaeological finds in languages. Especially even in English language, we find, for example, another gem is berserker. Berserk. When it's going berserk, someone goes berserk. Yeah.
They were said to turn into bears or wolves.
Exactly. There's so much there that we can dig out and study and understand. Used to understand the adventure of human history and civilization. Anyway, the point is that we are now, during the end of the age of Aries and beginning of age of the Pisces, we saw the development of the Abrahamic ideologies. So the Abrahamic ideologies are coming from Abraham. Abrahamic means from Abraham. And who is this Abraham? According to the Bible, to the Old Testament, it was one guy who was a pagan in Sumer, in Ur, of the Chaldeans, says the Bible. And this Abraham met an entity that presented itself as Yahweh and El, who promised. Abraham made a pact, an alliance, a covenant, a testament with Abraham, and says, if you and your heirs, if your people worship me alone and obey me and serve me and whatever, I will make of you my chosen people, and I will give you all the land. And that's where the idea of promised land comes. So the idea is that Yahweh told Abraham, I will give you this specific land, which was at that time the land of Canaan. And you go there and you take the land, and this will be your land. And from there, you will rule the entire earth, all the other nations and peoples. So all the three main Abrahamic religions are based on this point. So each one of them believes that they are the chosen people. And we know that in confused, ignorant cultures, the brothers in the same family are those who fight more than anyone else. And we also have lots of Bible stories of brothers fighting each other.
Yes.
So
Cain and Abel being the prime
Oh,
example.
Cain and Abel, the first example, that's a good start. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it set the scene for what.
Yeah, it sets the scene completely. So we can see that, actually we are not sure who was the bad one between the two. But okay,
no.
We have the version that is called propaganda.
Yes.
Now, the word propaganda, talking about language analysis, propaganda is, an Italian sounding name. In fact, it comes from Latin. It's a Latin term, which was invented by the Vatican, the Church of Rome, the first church. The first church, Christian church, was started officially, the official church was started by Constantine, the Roman emperor. So the language of the church was Latin. Propaganda literally means that which should be propagated.
Yes.
Which means the official version that we have to tell people. Not the truth, but what should be told people. That already says a lot.
Yes, it does. So, obviously, the age of Pisces is inherently linked to the rise of Abrahamism. There's definitely an association, probably even causality, you're saying, between the age of, because the metaphysical environment facilitated the rise of an Abrahamic ideology, effectively. Is that right, Mataji?
Yeah. And that's where, in the Middle East, this idea got the greatest development, because in the rest of the world, for example, the Romans, the Greeks and the Romans had developed during the age of Aries, which was, mostly imperialist. They didn't care about the crowds. They cared about the political control. So, there was this convergence of influences that created political Abrahamism, imperialistic Abrahamism, which probably in other ages of, Pisces would not have developed.
Yes.
So,
the environment was right.
Exactly. That's exactly, we were saying that, the cycles are not always exactly the same. It's a spiral and the combination of factors that determine different, inputs, different factors, different forces, different circumstances and conditions. So we got at some point, starting from about 200 to 300 BCE, the situation started with the creation of the Judaism as a religion.
And it was very iconoclastic as well, wasn't it, Mataji?
Yeah, it was a political choice. It was an imperialistic choice because it wanted to oppose and replace the imperial mentality of the Seleucid Empire, the Greek Empire. Now, who started this movement? Who started this big revolution were the Maccabees. You heard about the Maccabees?
Maybe not. Yes, I've heard about the Maccabees as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
There's a famous football team named after them.
Oh, yeah.
Israel.
That's the Israeli football team, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but they got that name from someone else, right?
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
From
Please carry on.
whom? You know from whom?
No, I don't know who.
That's a trick, you know. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
That's a spot.
Yeah.
Now, the Maccabees were some brothers who were in Palestine, Israel, and around 270 something BC, when the Palestine was taken over by the Seleucid Empire. Seleucus was one of the two successors to Alexander the Great. And Seleucus took over the Palestine, while Ptolemy was the other one. Alexander the Great left the Ptolemy and Seleucus, who took over his empire and split it. Ptolemy took the Egypt and the the eastern part, and Seleucus took the western part, mostly Palestine, Mesopotamia, like that. And Palestine, because he was Greek, and he wanted to introduce a Greek culture. And he wanted to control the Temple of Jerusalem. The temple was already there, but was pretty different from what we know, from the propaganda, the Jewish and Christian propaganda. Actually, the Temple of Jerusalem was full of murtis. And there was, the people didn't even know about the Jewish religion. It was just a temple. It was basically a Zoroastrian temple with very strong influences of Canaan, the Phoenicians. So we can even find in the Bible, there is one passage that says, Yahweh is talking and say, once you used to call me Baal.
Yes.
We talk about this.
Yeah.
You're not going to call me Baal anymore. You're going to go blah, blah, blah. Okay. So basically, there was a Zoroastrian temple, and there were a lot of deities or images,
right,
including a snake.
Right.
And these, to explain all this stuff, the Bible was created. Now, when the Maccabees revolted against Seleucus was trying to install, among all the other images, a statue of Zeus. He said, you have so many statues, why not one more? And Maccabees got very angry and said, no, absolutely not. And in fact, we are going to remove all the statues. And this is what is called the reconsecration of the Temple of Jerusalem. You heard about the festival of Hanukkah?
Yes, I have, yes.
That's the celebration of the reconsecration of the Temple of Jerusalem by the Maccabees. This stuff is not told to people in school or even in churches, because this is a very Jewish thing. But as you noticed, the Jews and the Israelis, they have a very strong identification with these Maccabean people, because they named the football team. So the Maccabean brothers actually started the Jewish religion. created the Jewish religion by collecting pieces and, of mythology and stories and everything. In fact, the main Maccabean guy came out and said, while we were cleaning the temples, we found some very ancient manuscripts written by Moses.
Right.
Exactly, which is, yeah.
Right.
And so they started to write the Bible by collecting pieces and, bits and pieces from here and there, especially from the Sumerian tradition, the Babylonian tradition, because 400 years earlier, a group of Jews had gone to Babylon, what they called the Babylonian exile, because Nabucodonosor was getting fed up with the robberies of the nomadic Hebrews, so he made the war and did the cleanup of the area and destroyed the temple. Officially, they say. So
yeah, I remember reading about him with Daniel and the fiery furnace, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. I remember reading about Nebuchadnezzar.
Exactly. Now, in the last 20 years or so, the historians and archaeologists have been, doing a bit of verification, and I found what is more, likely the actual story. But okay, we got some bits and pieces. We are just trying to, put them together in a greater picture. So what happened is that they started this official Jewish religion. For more references on this, I recommend to read and to listen to the presentations of Gad Barnea, who is a very famous archaeologist and professor of ancient history in Israel, who has been excavating especially the ancient Yahweh temple at Elephantine in Egypt. And it looks like that temple of Yahweh in Egypt was working until about, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 300 BCE, 300 BCE, when Cyrus, the Emperor Cyrus, was going on, started the Persian Empire. So when the Persian Empire defeated the Babylonian Empire and also attacked Egypt, the Jews in Egypt allied, they helped the Persian Empire, so the Egyptians kicked them out. And Cyrus the Great is the one who is described in the Bible as a Messiah, Mashiach, who started the reconstruction of the Temple of Jerusalem and quote unquote liberated the Jews from Babylon. So, there is a lot of research and, very interesting findings that we have, we can verify today.
It sets the scene quite nicely because you're seeing a polar shift, aren't you, during that time, this transition between and the advent of the Abrahamic worldview.
The politicized religion before the Maccabees and the dynasty they created, the Hasmonean dynasty created by the Maccabees, there was no idea of a politicized religion. There was no theocracy.
What's really interesting is that a lot of people do know that Abrahamism, they know the dates. Some more clued up people know, hang on a minute, Abrahamism sprung up. How did it spring up? But what you're doing now is you are connecting the dots at a deeper level and also linking it to a shift, to an astrological shift.
Yeah.
So that sets the scene for what was to follow. That plows the ground for what was to follow. Effectively, makes the ground
Exactly. So the beginning of the actual Abrahamic religions and ideologies was not, Abraham, which looks like he never actually existed, but the Hasmonean dynasty, which actually converted all the people in Palestine to the Jewish religion, which they didn't know anything about it before. And many of the surrounding people were converted by force, even. Now, what happened? Palestine, the Hasmonean dynasty went on to, rule Palestine, Israel, and Palestine. Was the actual first kingdom of Israel, and it went on until the 70 BCE, about, when the Hasmonean dynasty was defeated by the Romans, specifically by Pompey, who annexed Palestine to the Roman Empire. So from around 70 BCE to 70 CE, for 150 years, more or less, Palestine was under the Roman Empire. So we have the beginning of Christianity smack in the middle of that. And this is very important to understand the development of Christianity. Jesus was a Jew. And at that time, the Jewish religion, the Jewish people were still a bit confused. There were so many groups, so many interpretations. And the history of Christianity, the Gospels even, give us a pretty good picture if we know what the symbology is, what these signs are pointing to. For example, we have, you probably remember the names Pharisees, Sadducees, and Zealots.
Yes.
Okay. But, the Gospels and the Church are just talking about them. They're not exactly explaining what they are. So the Pharisees were the actual activists of the Hasmonean, were the ones who wanted to make the general population become Jewish, to follow the state religion. While the Sadducees were the heirs of the old temple culture that didn't bother at all about the people. They only bothered about the king and the temple. And whoever wants to go to a temple, that's their problem, but we are doing our own thing. Those are the Sadducees. So now the Sadducees and the Pharisees didn't agree with each other. But they were not the only two groups. There was a third major group that was variously known as Zealots. And in fact, again, as we were saying before, we have in the English dictionary, we have the word zealous, which means someone who is very dedicated to some ideology and, very serious about that. We could say today fundamentalist. So the Zealots were a messianic group. Now, the Sadducees didn't care about the messiahs because they only cared about the king and the temple. And bring all your sheep to the temple because we like to eat, mutton kebab. Okay, that basically. And Yahweh likes, the burning offerings. Okay. And the Pharisees were saying, oh, the people must follow the law. There is a law. They have to observe and do this and that. And the Zealots were talking about the Messiah. They say, no. The important thing is that the Messiah will come. Messiah means consecrated, Mashiach. And it's the equivalent of the Greek word Christos. Because the Messiah and Mashiach were anointed with sacred oil as both king and high priest. From the Zoroastrian tradition, this is not something the Jews invented. The Messiah was a Zoroastrian idea in which the king is also the high priest. So Christ, they were waiting for the Christ. They didn't call it Christ, they call it Messiah. Now, this is the other interesting step. These zealots waiting for the Messiah, they were thinking about the Messianic kingdom, which would put an end to the present world. And these zealots left what we found again quite recently at Qumran in the Dead Sea. You heard about the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls, absolutely, yes.
Okay, so the Dead Sea Scrolls were luckily, discovered, saved from destruction around the times of the Hasmoneans, because the Hasmoneans wanted to destroy the previous traditions, and the Zealot tradition was much older. As we were saying, it was directly connected to the Zoroastrian religion, which was taken up by the Jews in Babylon. So it was a much older tradition. So in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we will find very concerning texts, about the end of the world. In Greek, also, we are going to get into the Greek thing, here. In Greek, the discussion about the end of the world is called eschatology. Apocalyptic, the apocalyptic, like exactly. Revelation. Apocalypse in Greek means revelation, but revelation of what? Of the eschatological last battle between good and evil. And we are coming nearer to what is happening today. So, Jesus was, one of these people. He was a zealot. One of these groups of zealots was called the Essenes, but Jesus was a messianic apocalyptic prophet who was called Messiah by his followers. That's why the idea of Jesus Christ came.
So he
Joshua.
never went to India. He never went to India.
It's not so relevant because Jesus never talked about India. If Jesus had gone to India and if that was relevant, there would be some, some trace in Christianity. There is not. There is some trace in Gnosticism, but that's because, and then we're coming to the Greek part of it. At some point, in the year 70 of the current era, Jerusalem was destroyed by the Roman Empire because the Roman Empire was sick and tired of this Messiah craze. Because the Messiah was supposed to be the king and high priest of Israel. And that means that he would not recognize the authority of Rome, which didn't make the Romans happy because the Romans were only interested in the empire, in the power, political power. So whoever was not accepting the law and order of the Roman Empire, they were treated like rebels. Like fundamentalists, separationists, whatever. Insurrectionists. Yeah.
Like a fifth column. It's like a fifth column.
Yeah, so basically what happened, there were several messiahs and possible messiahs, but they all failed, basically. And in the year 70 of, the current era, CE, the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. They destroyed the temple, but they didn't kill everyone. But lots of Jews fled to Alexandria of Egypt, where there was still some, a big Jewish community. Now, the big Jewish community had started in Alexandria of Egypt around 300 to 300 BCE, when Ptolemy II developed the Library of Alexandria. Now, we should remember again that the Ptolemy pharaohs, just like the Seleucid emperors, were Greek. So Alexandria was mainly dominated by the Greek culture, and more specifically by what we call Hellenistic culture, which was precisely the culture that was that developed after Alexander came back from India, bringing back a lot of books and preachers and teachers and everything. So under the second generation after Alexander, Ptolemy II, there was a big development of the library and University of Alexandria. So Ptolemy II commissioned scholars in Alexandria to write a compendium, a summary, a record of all the ancient cultures. So he got the two main authors of that time were tasked, were asked to write respectively about the Egyptian culture and the Mesopotamian culture. So the Egyptian culture work was headed by one guy called Manetho, and the Mesopotamian culture was under the department headed by one guy called Berossus. Now, the Palestinian culture, which was the inheritance of the Canaan culture, which was not exactly Babylonian. The Canaan, the Phoenician, the Carthaginians, and everything was a different type of culture. So we can say, Jewish, Israeli, whatever, Palestinian. And this task was given to a group of 70 scholars who wrote the first known edition of the Old Testament Bible, the Torah. And that's why it's called the Septuaginta, because Septuaginta in Latin means 70. So it is a version of the 70. Now, the most ancient copy of this edition that is still existing is actually from the 1st century of the current era. It's not 300 years before the present era. It's the 1st century of the present era, current era. And it was copied by a Christian, one of the early Christians whose name is Origen. You heard about Origen?
Yes, I've heard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he was a crazy guy, but So we have that copy, which is in Greek language. And following that, the Gospels were written in Greek. More or less in the similar, period. The 1st and the 2nd centuries of the present era, the current era. So the compilation, Origen's compilation of the Old Testament, plus the first compilations of the New Testament. All in Greek. The first...
Not many people know that.
Exactly. This is something that... Bart Ehrman is joking a lot about it, because Bart Ehrman is now recently retired, but he has been a tenured professor of early Christianity in a university in North Carolina, which is the most Bible Belt place in the United States. And he is joking, like the first question I ask, of my students when they start my course is in which language the Gospels were written. Some people even says English, like, okay,
But I would have said Hebrew.
Exactly. Yeah, most of people say Hebrew. Practically nobody knows, nobody is told actually they were written in Greek. So, and Hebrew was not even the language that was spoken in Palestine at that time. Because the official language in Palestine at the times of Jesus was Aramaic. And Aramaic was the official language of the Persian Empire. And Jesus spoke Aramaic, he didn't speak Hebrew. And the first, the most ancient copy of the Hebrew Bible, that is called the Masoretic Bible, guess what is when it was written? This is going to be funny. It's the Codex.
Probably a lot later than people think.
Yeah, but how much later people can't even wrap their head around. It's called Codex of Leningrad. Yeah,
I wonder if it's a few hundred years, maybe. Who knows?
Year 1000.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that late.
Yep. The Codex of Leningrad is the most ancient copy of the Old Testament, found in Russia, Leningrad. And there are two other copies. One is the Codex of Vaticanensis, and the other one is Codex Sinaiticus, which was found in Israel. All three are in Hebrew, Masoretic copies. But, the most ancient one is the one, year 1000. So, we can already see that we have some, more complicated things going on that most people don't even realize the existence of. So basically, what happened when the Jerusalem was evacuated, basically. The temple was destroyed, and most of the Jews dispersed. Of course, not all of them. Lots of Jews were shipped to Rome to build the Colosseum as slaves. That were mostly the agitators, the activists. Lots of people were left in Palestine around Jerusalem. They were mostly farmers,
So they killed the academics, they enslaved the academics.
Yeah, they removed the academics because they were the dangerous intellectuals. Again, the dangerous intellectuals tried to, reorganize, and they had another war against Rome, but, it didn't last long. But what happened, this messianic cult of the Zealots was taken up by, and you probably heard about him, Saint Paul.
Yes.
Saul of Tarsus. Tarsus it was in Anatolia.
Yeah.
Was not in.
That's where Pauline Christianity comes from.
Exactly. So basically, what happens? The Pauline Christianity developed and was taken up by the Roman Empire because it was very suitable to the idea of the Roman Empire. In fact, there is some historical evidence that actually Pauline Christianity didn't even start with Paul. Paul is just a character like Abraham and Moses and David and all the other characters in the Bible. And some people say he didn't even exist. Anyway. So these people say that actually it started from Flavius Josephus. You heard about Flavius Josephus?
No, I've not heard of him.
Okay, that's interesting because Josephus was a zealot, a messianic, activist during the 70s, when there was this famous revolt against Rome, after which, Rome ended by destroying the temple. And Josephus was one of the leaders of the revolutions against the Romans. Then he met the Romans. And he thought, wait a minute, these people are not so easy. They're big, they have lots of money, they have lots of army, they're so organized, they're very powerful. Maybe it's not a good idea to fight against them. So he just, as they say, turned coat. He shifted camp.
Is that where the saying is, if you can't beat them, join them?
Yeah, exactly. Join them and try to, infiltrate them. So what happened? Josephus went to the Flavian, Titus, to the son of Vespasian, who was there as a general and later became the emperor. And he said, "Oh, you are the Messiah of Israel."
He said that's the Roman emperor.
Yeah, yeah, Titus. And then said, "Yeah, well, thanks. You're such a nice guy. Why don't you come and work for me? I will adopt you, as a member of my gens, of my family." That's why he's called Flavius Josephus, because he was adopted into the Flavian family.
Yes, Mataji, I have heard of Flavius Josephus. Absolutely right. Yes. Now that you've mentioned it, I have heard of him. He's very, very famous.
Yeah.
I came across him in school and everything. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, and he's the one who is...
You know what, Mataji? Very, very interesting. Yeah, I didn't know his origins.
Yeah, exactly. We need to dig history, text and context. As I always say, history. Yeah.
I thought he was an indigenous Roman. But
nope.
That's why.
Nope.
Yeah, that's why. That's why when I couldn't connect the dots when you mentioned.
Yeah, Josephus is not a Roman name. It's a Jewish name.
No, but Flavius.
Flavius, because he was adopted by the emperor into his gens, into his family. That's why he became Flavius Josephus. And the official Christianity, the Vatican especially, when the Constantine started the official Christianity state religion, they used this Flavius Josephus, who lived 200 years earlier, as the greatest, the main witness, historical witness of Jesus and the development of Christianity. That's why Flavius Josephus is so famous for being, quoted as historical evidence of the existence of Jesus Christ. So what happens is, if you can't win them, join them and possibly ride them, and that was the idea of Pauline Christianity.
Well, that's the connection between the Old Testament and the New Testament, isn't it?
Exactly. That's why the idea of the Messiah moved from a very material, political position, of king and high priest, to the mystical idea of the Christ consciousness, the Lamb of God, the resurrection. All this stuff was totally alien, was totally unknown by the early Christians. And who were the early Christians? You heard about James? James is a very...
James, yes.
Yeah.
James, yes.
Who was James?
Yes. Sorry, it was James, was it?
Yeah, who was the James guy?
James, yes.
Who was he?
I don't know, who was he?
He was Jesus' brother.
Right.
And when Jesus was asked, who if you're not there, who should we turn to? And Jesus said, go to James, because James was the actual head of the group of the followers of Jesus. Yeah.
Interesting.
When Christianity became the state religion of the Roman Empire, James was erased, as was Mary Magdalene, as were the Gnostics, and all the so-called heretics. Now,
Well, that goes against the future narrative, doesn't it?
Exactly, the political empire narrative, because the Messiah idea as an actual king and high priest was totally against the Roman ideas. So the followers of James were labeled as Ebionites. So that is the name by which they were labeled as heretics. And now there is one very interesting scholar who is also an archaeologist and professor, and his name is James Tabor, who has, he has become an Ebionite. So, he has been researching and, digging and finding, and he is presenting himself as an Ebionite. And he's talking about the disaster that, is the Pauline Christianity. So all this has been coming out in the last 20, 30 years. And it's extremely interesting. So basically, there is a big confusion, but the underground line of the Pharisees that were dispersed by the Roman destruction of the temple. The Sadducees completely disappeared. The Pharisees went underground, and they got this idea through, Flavius Josephus was a Pharisee, as it was, or at least as it's said to have been, Paul of Tarsus, Saul of Tarsus. They were both Pharisees. So these Pharisees, they say, okay, let's join them, but let's bring them down from inside. So Christianity, in the end, in a relatively short period, was able to bring down the Roman Empire. So much that Constantine had to run away from Rome, and he went to found a new capital for the Roman Empire in Turkey, Istanbul. And he called him Nova Roma, New Rome, Constantinople, the city of Constantine. So you see, and then after getting the Roman Empire, fail and, become completely controlled by the church that was created by the Pharisees, then they went even deeper, because the church, started to go against the Jews. So in order to escape from the, persecution, we can say, that the official church was doing against the Jews went even more, underground, and they got into finance. You see where we are going here?
Oh, yes. Please carry on.
So they started the exploitation of the colonial system with the East India Company. And
so that's really interesting, because I think, there is indeed a connection between the ancient empire and more modern empires, and I think. And I think that there is no such thing as a new world order. It's an old world order.
It's a very old, and it's what they call the deep state.
Yes, indeed. What they now like to call the deep state, but
because it's very deep.
And what's really interesting is that people think that these East India Company won by military force, whereas what they don't seem to understand is it was done through economics, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Effectively,
Yeah.
in essence, isn't it?
So that's what I think that I don't remember which of the presidents of the United States put this sign over their desk, and the sign, reads, "Is the economy stupid?" It's all about the money, the finance, the financial power. But the point is that, they still have this idea of the Messianic kingdom. So they still want to become the nation of priests who, controls the rest of the planet, all the other nations, like Yahweh promised to Abraham. And, I'm glad to say that now we can start to talk about these things openly because, the time has come.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. And I think and I guess obviously there's a lot to pick up in the next hour when we talk about this, but what's really interesting and what I think you're trying to get at here, what I think you're trying to say is that there is there is a process of actively trying to create a future reality.
Yeah.
Which is diametrically opposed to the Vedic worldview, where you see time as being cyclical, like a natural passage of the seasons, whereas what is happening in the moment in the world is more actively trying to engineer a certain situation to happen, if that makes sense, which is against natural law. Would that be reasonable?
Yeah. Yeah. The end of days, the Messianic kingdom.
Yes. The challenge as a Dharmi I have with that worldview is that there's no such thing as end of days, and because time is cyclical, and secondly, no one in Vedic law, as far as I'm aware, has actively tried to engineer a situation
of distraction.
Law.
Yeah, of distraction. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Because this, because that's completely against Dharma. That is what Krishna in Gita is explaining about the Asuras. This is a typical Asuric mentality. And we can find all the confirmations in the stories of the Bible. That's an Asura. So, the Vedic culture, Vedic society, the Vedic knowledge is definitely against all this. Okay, so
that's been a fascinating discussion, and I think that sets the scene for the next hour, where we perhaps discuss where we discuss the dharmic worldview on very recent events, if that makes sense.
And we can discuss, for example, Peter Thiel, Pete Hegseth, and the Islamic idea of the end of the days.
Yes.
The greater Israel. All this stuff is coming up. Everybody's talking about these things, so we can also, in the crowd, we can also afford to talk about that.
It would be interesting to have a dharmic perspective on this, because we hear lots of intra-Abrahamic perspectives on what's going on, but we don't often hear of perhaps the truly dharmic interpretation of events. And I think
not only that, but some work that I've been, some project that I've been working on is how we can build, how we can facilitate a new age form of multicultural society, which also has space, for example, for Christianity or Islam or Judaism. Because, as you know, Hinduism, Dharmic, Vedic religion is extremely tolerant. There is no problem. The only problem with Abrahamic ideologies is that they are the intolerant ones.
Yes.
But we can, offer them a better perspective, just like Hinduism has done that at the times of Ptolemy. 2,300 years ago. We have, look at that. This is a new zodiac sign. This is happening again. This is exactly what happened at the time of Ptolemy II, and the Library of Alexandria. We have this opportunity. The situation is very similar. The cycle is bringing us to a very similar situation. So what we can create now is comparable to that cultural revolution. And we'll talk about that next time.
Mataji, my obeisance to you. An excellent discussion as always, and look forward to picking
Thank you
this
so
up
much.
again next time.
Jai Shri Manara. Jai Shri Manara.
Jai.